Welcome back, everyone. So tonight is the last class in our course of Towards a More Compassionate World. At the end of the class, I'm going to talk to you about what we want to do next. But last week we kind of left on a cliffhanger, right? Because last week's session was all about the power of our words, the impact of our words, and really like the sensitivity that Judaism really, I'm going to use a strong word, but I think it's the truth, demands from us with how we use our words and how we should be thoughtful and mindful of how our words are going to land with someone else. So at the end of the class, we had some questions, right? One of my kind of favorite ones, I think the one that kind of lingered was, aren't we allowed to just vent? Right? Someone was telling us that people come and talk to her. Is that not okay in Judaism? Can we never ever vent in Judaism?
What depends what it's about.
Okay, vent.
Like if you're just like if you had a really, really hard day and you have a good friend then sure you can say that. But if you want to vent about all the people that you don't like that you ran into, then it's not okay.
Okay, so yes, Rachel.
I think you also have to vent to somebody that knows that you're venting and that can remember that this is only one side of the story. Like you can't have somebody that's just gonna like be like, yeah, you're right, and like rile you up. You need someone that's gonna
You think that person's bad? You should have seen what I saw her do last time, right?
Like you have to find somebody that can listen, but also like not take you, I guess. Obviously there's face value to everything that people say, but I think just not be not have an influence and impact the way they actually see that person.
Okay. Yeah.
I think you can vent if you don't have a malicious intent. And then also that you're looking for like a solution or a way to improve.
Okay. Okay. So we're getting it. I mean, you're taking some of the fun out of it, but whatever. Sarah?
If you need to vent, you have to make sure it's in a very private setting where it's only one-to-one and that other people can't hear you.
Yeah. I feel like there's a whole class here called mindful venting, right? Which is it an oxymoron to be like mindful while you're venting? But whatever. Yes, Nina, you were going to say something. Oh no, was your hands up? Jessica?
I forgot because I was like, no, that's more mindful venting. I think that it's important to say to the person, I need to vent about this. And then not that way you're prefacing it with, I'm trusting you to understand that this
very hard to hear.
That's because I'm really far away, Shari. I'm sorry.
Let's see if this is helpful.
I think just
we can try.
Speak into the microphone.
Yeah, speak to
the microphone. I was saying that I think that it's
Is that better?
No. Now she can't. No, we can't hear her.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever.
Okay, keep talking.
Okay, that it's important that when we're venting, that we preface the venting session with, I just need to vent about this, and then get it out. That way it's not just, you're walking in and saying, word vomit, here's all of this bad stuff. Like the person understands what their role is in the process.
Okay, that's to save that relationship, right? Like,
yeah.
Yes.
Does it matter if you're venting about something versus someone?
Good question. Very good question. What about throw another question out? What about whistleblowing? Everyone here is familiar with the concept of whistleblowing?
Oh, totally. I was in the military, so I know all about it.
Oh. So my most favorite story of whistleblowing is a few years ago, there was a story of a Facebook, which is now Meta, employee who was a whistleblower for the company and showed how Facebook had data that showed that the algorithms that they use are causing mental health problems, particularly in teenagers. and chose to ignore it in order to drive profits. What does Judaism say about something like that? Good or not good?
Yeah, because it prevents harm from a lot of people.
Hi, Monica and John.
And I don't know, is that, I would hope that that falls under the halacha of things that you're allowed to speak lashon hara about, like, or whatever, to have this conversation. But is causing mental harm to someone, does that fall under things you're allowed?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, but I mean, Pikuach Nefesh, the concept that Rachel just brought up is a slightly different concept. It's related, but it's slightly different. Pikuach Nefesh is there's a concept in Judaism that if a person's is at risk of losing a limb or their life, then we transgress most of the laws in Jewish law to save their life. So let's just say, God forbid, it's Shabbat and someone is having a suspected heart attack. Do we call 911? Yes. Is it a violation of Shabbat under general circumstances to use the phone? Yes. Is it a violation of Shabbat under these circumstances to call 911? No, it's not only not a violation, but it would be mandatory to call it, right? It's an obligation at that point because the value of human life takes precedence over most Jewish laws, except there are 3 that don't. That we don't transgress for, right? So that is that's a slightly different concept. So what we're going to kind of look into today is that we spent last discussion talking about the impact of our words, right? And the harm that we can use with our words if we say things that can hurt other people. We spoke about the 5 different categories of forbidden speech. There's hurting other people with words, there's spreading rumors, there's gossip, there's all these types of things that we're not allowed to say because our words have tremendous impact. Now, this week, we're kind of going to balance that with our words have tremendous impact. And sometimes we can be in a situation where we have a choice. And if we choose not to use our words, we can cause tremendous harm. Can anyone think of a situation like that?
Yeah, somebody that you know is threatening suicide, and you feel that they're serious, so you're obligated to tell somebody about it.
Absolutely, right? That is, I know that they're like saying it's. I'll have a word with the husband afterwards. It's like I'm sure it's like the last 2 weeks the women were noisy. It's fine. We'll give that. Yeah. We don't need that. We can outnoise them any day of the week, right? Yes, perfect example, right? Someone is, God forbid, in a situation where they are feeling suicidal and you're not sure, do I say something? Do I not say something? Is it wrong to say something about this person? Absolutely not. In most circumstances, I mean, you find the right person to say it and to whatever, right? Another example, a good friend of yours comes to you and says, guess what? I met this wonderful new person. And she tells you the name, and you happen to know that that person has a history of being abusive in relationships. The question now is not, am I allowed to talk or not? The question actually is, am I allowed to remain silent? Because there's actually a law in Judaism that says that you're not allowed to stand by idly if someone could get harmed, right? If you see someone about to get mugged, for example, right? You can't just watch in Judaism and let it go. Obviously, whatever the details of things, but you have to stand up and do something, right? Call the police, tell the person, whatever it is. You can't. It all goes back to this what we were talking about when we discussed when we started about the concept of judging other people. That the Jewish ideal is not don't judge, because that's kind of like a standoffish approach. Right? Like, nothing to do with me, not my problem, right? That's not how Judaism wants us to be. Judaism wants us to be involved in the community, part of the community, together with other people, right? In connection, in relationships with other people. And that's why Judaism says, judge favorably, right? And it gives us the criteria of who deserves it, how, etc. But it's all based on this premise that we're not supposed to be on our own, right? This is my life, that's your life, because there's a bit of a standoffish attitude there, which is not conducive to caring and loving and building community that Judaism wants us to. So we have, when we are using our words, we have a balance. We have a balance between all the different laws that tells us that you're not allowed to cause harm with your words. And on the other side, we have the balance of, if I can prevent harm from happening, I'm not allowed to stay silent. I'll give you another example. Someone you know is wants to go into partnership with someone else for a business. And you know that the person has a terrible sense of business, right? Terrible with money. Can you say something? Sorry? So Jessica would say you're obligated to say something. Anyone else?
Well, I think it depends on how well you know that information. Like, did somebody else tell you? Or do you know it for a fact in both those examples?
Okay.
Because if you tell them and it's wrong, that will harm the person.
Exactly. I love it. You're making it much more complicated, right? It's not so simple. Because what happens if you tell them and they don't go into partnership and you happen to have been wrong? And this could have been this person's ticket to financial independence, and it could have been a beautiful partnership.
It also depends on what kind
1
of
minute.
business and relationship.
Okay.
Because even this person is bad with money, maybe the business nature is different, and they will use this person not to gain the money, but to work with the people, to bring people in.
That's a very good point as well. So we're seeing already that it's a little bit more complicated. Jessica, you had a question, yes.
Both the business and with relationship, you have the business specifically. I feel like in the business relationship, you have an obligation to physically, for a fact that there is an abuse there. But in a business, you have to wait till you're past.
Okay, so that is a very good question. And where is...
You're looking for the answer.
I am looking for... Okay, I apologize about this because I had... Okay, because the question, the answer is more complicated than yes or no. That's why it's a bit of a trick question, because someone could have said yes, and you could have been right, and someone could have said no, and you could have been right. Because there's actually what's considered, there's a concept called Lashon Hara, talking bad about other people, LeToi'eles, which means for a constructive purpose, right? Which means that something that under ordinary circumstances would be considered Lashon Hara, talking bad about another person, and would be forbidden. If these 7 conditions are fulfilled, then it then becomes fine. Then you're allowed to say it. Okay, so give me a moment, and I have then. Yes. Where is it gone? 9, 7. Here it is.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. The 7 conditions. Here they are. Yeah, all the way at the back, obviously. Right? Okay. So let me give you let's start with a scenario. Okay, we'll take it away from all these different scenarios. Let's try and find a very simple scenario. You see a teenage boy passed his driver's test license. He got his license maybe a month ago or something. You see him driving around the neighborhood. He runs a stop sign. Are you allowed to tell his parents?
Yeah, because he could kill somebody the next time.
Okay, that's a good reason to say it. Anyone would say
no.
Why not?
I have one at home.
What'd she say?
She has a teenage son at home.
So you wouldn't want one of us calling you to be like, I saw your son run a red light.
I kind of assume he is doing it and I'm talking with him about it, but I don't want anybody to call.
There's a reason why insurance is so high for
Exactly.
males under 25. Anyone kind of, so we have some yeses, we have some nos. Anyone
I think
else?
you need to talk to him directly.
Oh.
I want to back that's better. Yes, hard though, because
No, are you kidding? I think other children listen to other people.
Yeah,
other
but think
than
about
their
it,
parents.
but it's for little kids, that's one thing, but when you start talking about a teenager and how are you going to approach them and how are they going to take it? So me going to I kind of sort of have this. My kid keeps pulling. He drives between my house and his dad's house. He's not supposed to do it by himself. He keeps doing it by himself because he wants his car at the house that we're at, whatever. But he keeps pulling. He doesn't pull all the way in front of my house. He parks like overlapping my neighbor's driveway, maybe by half an inch. And she texted me about it today because that half an inch is really bothering her, and I understand. But if she had said that to him, he would have been so devastated.
Right.
So I know how to say to him, hey, next time can you just pull up a little bit more from Scott Joanne and don't let you near their driveway. But I don't think that if she had said something, it would have gone over so well, and he would have
Okay, so you've all raised very good points, right? What we're going to do is we're going to apply the 7-condition test to it, okay, and see under what circumstances you maybe should, because again, it could potentially be a serious issue, right? Especially if you see the teenager just like driving straight through a stop sign, like that is dangerous, right? So the number one is you must have either witnessed it, or if you heard about it from someone else, you are able to verify its truthfulness, right? So that means if you heard that this guy has a reputation of being abusive, under most circumstances, that's not good enough. Unless you can actually verify whether it's true or not, right? You can call the person who they were in relationship with, or you can call the sister of the person, right? There has to be a weightiness to this. You have to have either seen it yourself or can verify its truthfulness, right? So in this case with the teenage kid, we saw it ourselves, right? We were all there watching it, right? Yeah. We saw it ourselves for the intents and purposes. The second thing, okay, and this is a good one as well, is you have to have calmly thought over if something wrong was actually done, right? So whether there was a theft, there was a damage, or there was something else that was done wrong, right? For example, I get mad at someone in my carpool, right? If I'm running a carpool for driving the kids to school, and I get mad at one of the other parents for not switching days with me. Did the other parent actually do anything wrong? No, right? So I need to calm down, and I need to actually ask the question, was anything wrong done here? Because just because I didn't like what happened doesn't mean that something wrong was done. In the case of the teenager, was anything wrong done by running the stop sign? Yes. Absolutely yes, right? So they fulfilled this condition. Third one gets a little bit trickier. You must first attempt to approach the person who did the thing wrong and try and resolve it with them. Right? So let's just say you lend someone $500 and they don't pay you back. Are you allowed to go and tell other people about it? No. Condition number one, it happened to me. I know they didn't pay me back, right? Condition number two, I know it's wrong not to pay back. Condition number three would say, first, I need to go to the other person and try and resolve it. I need to go to the other person and say, look, you got to pay me back, right? Take them to court, whatever it is. You have to first go and attempt to resolve it with the offender. So in this situation, you would, and we'll find out later why this is so important, you would have to try and say something to the teenager themselves, right? Like, and obviously we have to be sensitive and caring about it. And it was, like, I don't know if you noticed, but there was a stop sign there and you kind of ran it, right? You know, whatever it is, right? Again, we have to do it in a way that's sensitive and caring. I don't know if you noticed, but your car is, you know, this is my problem. I'm super picky about, you know, no one driving in front of my driveway. I don't know if you noticed, right? Right? So it has to be, but we have to attempt to resolve it with the person who did it wrong. Yes, Nina, you have a question.
I feel like that's especially in the scenario that we spoke about, like with a teenager, so it's a minor. And like, what do? Like, you go knock on the door, and their parents answer the door, and like, I speak to their kid. Like, it's complicated.
It is complicated, and we have to use our common sense. And I'm just
What
going
was
to push
the
back a little bit
comment?
on the comment was that it's a minor. I'm going to push back a little bit on it, because if this person is old enough to be driving a vehicle, they're old, right? I mean, they're especially, we have to be sensitive about it, right? We have to do it in a sensitive way. But I think at that point, if they're old enough to be maneuvering a vehicle around, they should be old enough to take the consequences of that actions. And if they're driving in a way that is potentially harmful, then having a conversation with someone else who sees that in a kind way is actually, I think, a good learning opportunity for them, right? And again, it has to be, we have to be with our common sense, right? And we're going to get to it in one of the further conditions, right? We have to be with your common sense. If you're going to go knock on the parents' door and the parents are going to say, like, why do you want my kids? And you're like, oh, it's nothing or whatever, and you're just going to create more thing like that, then back off, right? You know, whatever. Like, we have to use our common sense, but the principle generally under these circumstances is, first, you have to try and resolve it with a person. And again, what's the opportunity here? The opportunity, that what's the idea that it's showing us is that the idea is that, or you tell me, but instead of me telling you, when you hear this condition, what does it drive us to do?
To resolve the relationship.
Resolve the relationship, you know, nip the problem in the bud, right? Like, instead of making, you know, someone doesn't pay you back, and instead of like putting up signs all around town saying this person is a scammer or whatever else, right? Give the person opportunity. Maybe the person is like, oh my gosh, you know, I feel absolutely terrible. I didn't know how to handle the situation. I just need an extra 3 weeks, right? And maybe if you gave them an extra 3 weeks, or they say, I need a payment plan, can I pay you 100 this week and 100 for the next 4 weeks? And maybe that's a way you can resolve it. But the idea is, communicate with each other in a way that can hopefully resolve the situation, because we're not looking to just badmouth someone across town. We're looking to do things that will improve people and relationships. Yes.
Does this have anything to do with, if you know someone, a Jew, is going to marry a non-Jew, to try to break up a relationship? That's something else. Huh?
Good luck with that one. Aren't there like conditions like you have to know the person?
So that comes under a whole different category of Jewish law, right?
Okay.
Which is called tochacha, which means that in Jewish law, there is a law that if you see someone else doing something wrong, we have an obligation to rebuke them, right? The caveat for that is that you're only allowed to do it if you have the strength of the relationship where they can hear you do it. Because if you're going to rebuke them and you don't have that relationship and it's just going to get their back up, you've made things worse, right? So it's a very sensitive topic, but that's where it comes under that concept. And again, it's the same underlying principle, is that we're here to support and help each other, right? And real good relationships tell us what we need to hear, not just what we want to hear. But you need to have that relationship before you can start doing that to everyone. So that was a good question. Okay, let's go to number 4. Also not so easy. You're not allowed to exaggerate what happened. Okay? You know, you work for a company. Sorry? Maybe.
It's like, it doesn't come out. I noticed this with myself, I can't speak for other people. When I'm telling something over, this is what happens. It comes out, and I'm like, that's not nearly as bad as my reaction to it. But trust me, it's bad.
You could say like he blasted through the stop sign, but really he like rolled through it.
Yeah. And also when we're emotionally involved, it often comes like, you know, you work for someone who's very tight, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, I worked for the tightest, stingiest person ever in the whole world, right? Like, you know, like he literally counted how many paper clips we all use. Maybe it's a bit tight, right? Like, but when we're emotionally involved in the situation, it is easy to exaggerate. And some of us have more of a problem with this than other people, right? But the idea again here is facts, right? Stick to the facts, verify the facts, stick to the facts. You're not allowed to exaggerate. And again, it's give you a situation. You know, it's so easy in that sort of situation. You see someone driving recklessly or running a stop line to get out and be like, "You're nuts! You're the like craziest driver ever, right? Like, what are you doing? Are you trying to kill someone? Like, we can." Sometimes, maybe it's just me, right? Overreact to a situation, right? Especially when our emotions, right? And again, when I think when our emotions are involved, which they often are, we can sort of overreact, which is why we got to take the time, calm down, verify the facts, try resolve it, make sure something wrong's done, and don't exaggerate. Gets harder. Okay, principle number 5 is we have to do it because we want to achieve justice, not because I hate that person, right? I work for this miserable, stingy person, and I'm going to make sure that everyone knows how stingy is. Sorry, that doesn't fulfill number 5, right? It has to be because we care about justice. We care about doing the right thing. We want to make things right. You see this kid running through a stop sign and you see red because you're like, oh my goodness, like you don't understand that you are like driving what is potentially a weapon, like you should not be behind the wheel, whatever. And you talk to the kid and you say, you ran a stop line. He's like, oh, come on, don't worry about it, right? Like, okay, so you tried condition number 4, that you tried to resolve with him, but there's obviously no going anywhere. You cannot then, under those circumstances, when you're still burning mad, go to the parents and tell them because you're too emotionally invested. Again, what do you think the reasoning behind this condition is? What's likely to happen when we're doing it because I want to get back or I hate that person? Yeah, you're not thinking rationally. You're not, you're likely to exaggerate, right? We have to do it for the right reasons, not because we hate that person or we're mad at the person or anything else. Number 6, if there's any way to achieve the same results without having to give that information over, you should do that, right? So I'll give you a scenario, for example. Let's say you have a really, really, uncomfortable situation happens between you and a friend, right? And you witnessed it, so you know it's true, right? You know something wrong has been done, but you really need to talk to someone about it. If you can talk and vent without sharing who the other party is, and that will fill your need, then that's the way to do it, right? Because sometimes we can, right? Sometimes we can say, you'll never believe what happened to me, right? This friend, and you don't have to say which friend it is, or someone like that did that, or even in a situation like with a teenage kid, right? So you're casually sitting over Shabbat lunch with the other family, and you casually, bring up the concept of like drivers and how important it is to stop at stop signs. Potentially, you could achieve the same goal without having to tell the parents your child ran a stop sign. Again, it's something that we have to use our common sense, our brain, our think through beforehand. But if there's any way to resolve the situation without spilling the goods, then that's the way to do it. 7, you have to know that the consequences that this person will suffer will be no more than they would face if they were brought to a Jewish court, right? So let's just say this parent's, this child's parent, this teenage child, and that if they hear that their kids ran a stop sign, they take away the car for a year. Would you be allowed to do that? No, because what the person will suffer is more than what they should suffer. Similarly, right? Someone doesn't pay you back $500. and they have a business in town. And if you know that this person, if you spread the news that this person hasn't paid back the money, no one is going to frequent his business. You're not allowed to do it, because the pain that the loss that he would suffer would be too much for what he did.
So then why doesn't he just pay him back?
He should pay him back. You have to take him to Jewish court. Absolutely. Take him to Jewish court. Do what you can. Again, they're tricky situations, and a lot of times it's you have to think about the scenario and think about the each of these 7 conditions and how you can fulfill them, right? But absolutely, the person has to pay him back. And even if he doesn't pay back, I had a story, someone told me that they okay, so it's a slightly different story, right? But I think the point perhaps is the same, that someone owed them a lot of money, right? I don't know, something was in $10,000 or something like that, right? A lot of money. And they could have taken the person to court, but they decided not to, right? In their case, they decided not to because the cost of the court case, right? And the cost of what it would do to them was too high, right? And sometimes we just have to swallow a loss in life, right? That's just the way life is sometimes, right? And I see a lot of nods around the table because I see that people kind of understand that. The flip side of it is that just because we swallow a loss, we still have to do the right thing, right? And sometimes, yeah, it kind of sucks that kind of happens, but it is what it is. Any questions so far on the 7 conditions? Yes.
That's the case with the abuser. You wouldn't want to approach the abuser if you're hearing that someone's making a shidduch and then you know that person might be an abusive person. You can't like talk to them about it, or can't how would you verify that?
And that's really where I was asking that question is in the case of a shidduch, because if I know that somebody's dating somebody else who's problematic and I'm not asked about it, can I say anything?
Okay. So the question that's being brought up, I'm just going to repeat for everyone here, is an excellent question, right? And this is in the case of a shidduch, a potential date, where someone, something that's potentially problematic about the person. So firstly, there's a couple of things, conditions that you have to do, right? Is you have to either know it firsthand, or you have to verify. Now, if you can't, then perhaps direct the person who's asking you about it to someone that can, right? The second thing that you kind of have to do is also you have to know that the thing that is problematic is actually problematic, right? I'll throw out a silly example. If you think that person's not smart enough, that is not necessarily a problematic thing in a relationship, right? If you know this person has an anger problem, and every time they get angry, they break things, that is a problematic thing in a relationship, right? And I think sometimes this is something that we have to bear in mind, is that there are just because the person's like, I don't know, stupid. Let's use the word stupid, right? I just want to throw out random examples. That's not a barrier to having a very happy, healthy, successful relationship, right? Whatever, that's for the person to kind of find out on their own and figure it out. If there's something that an anger problem, an abuse problem, right? An addiction that they're not seeking help for, all these types of things, they are documented to be problematic in relationships. And if you know that, or if you can verify the truthfulness of this, you're not allowed to keep quiet about it.
Verify it, because let's say it's an ex-girlfriend and they're just mad at him, so they're spreading rumors about him. How do you actually verify it? I mean, unless they took them to court and there's a court order or something.
You saw the bruises.
I mean, if it's the girlfriend, so whatever. I dated someone who was very problematic. I've gotten phone calls from Shafranim about this. From matchmakers about the person that I dated. And the way that it works, the way that they get my numbers are, they'll call somebody, the matchmaker will call someone and say, what do you know about this person? And the person will say, call Jessica.
Right.
And they'll call say what? They'll say to call me.
which by the way is the way to do it, right? Because what basically she knows because she had direct experience, right? So let me use an example, right? Let's call him John. Is that okay? Okay, let's call the guy John, right? So you call me up and you're like, a friend of mine is wants to know more about John. Do you know him? Now I know from Jessica what I know from Jessica, but I don't have a way to verify that. So what I do instead is I'm like, go call Jessica, and then you can direct it to her, because that I know. I know that Jessica has had direct impact with her, so I don't have to be the one to tell them. But sorry, go and find out.
Call Jessica.
I have a question.
You anymore.
No, it's not. And you know what? Like, the minute someone tells you, go call this person, that's a red flag right there, right? And if you're, so you've done your responsibility.
Right.
Yeah, Shari, you were gonna say.
Not everyone is going to want to be so forthcoming in terms of this like verification process. So my question is, can you still relay information to someone that you think might be injured in this, let's say, match, with a disclaimer? And you say, look, I couldn't verify it, but there's this concern of potential X. So you're not saying that you saw it, you're not trying to aggrandize it, you're doing it out of like all the other 7 parameters, but you just don't, the person that could verify it isn't willing to discuss it with a stranger or another person. Are you still able to like give a notion to this impacted person with a disclaimer attached?
So I don't know if this is the sort of situation you're talking about, but I'll give you an example, right? Let's say someone works for a company and it ends with a non-disclosure, right? A non-disclosure agreement. So legally, they're not allowed to talk about what happened, right? But there are ways to say it without saying it, right? You kind of say, like, so if someone calls up and says, oh, so what was, well, I can't answer your question, right? Like, that's right. So there are ways to kind of say it. And if the person doesn't want to say, and you're saying, look, I know this person had a relationship with them which ended badly, and they don't want to talk about it, that is a truckload of information, right? That is a truckload of information, because when you have a healthy relationship that breaks up and the person is like, whatever person, there's a lot of you can say a lot of things without actually saying it, and you're then saying what you know, right? You're not saying the hearsay of what this person told you. If you say, and look, it's on the other person to do some digging as well, right? We don't have to save the whole world. We have to do what we can to balance things. That on the one hand, because the truth is, we don't know, right? When you're not involved in someone else's relationship, you don't really know what goes on. But all we can do is share what we know about what went on, and then the other person has to do their due diligence, right? If someone tells, so someone comes to you and says, "Tell me about John," and I'm like, you're like, "Well, John, I don't know, but I know he was in a relationship with Jessica, and Jessica does not have many nice things to say about him," right? That's a red flag. Right? You've done you're not whitewashing the situation. You're not saying, oh my gosh, John, he's incredible, right? That's whitewashing, right? Or you're not saying, I don't know, right? You're saying, what you're saying is what you know to be true. And that's enough information for the person to kind of say, oh my gosh, I need to look into this further. Does that answer the question?
Yes, but I feel, oh, sorry.
Okay, we'll come back to you in a second, Sharon. Yes, Mom.
Say John was an alcoholic or whatever, maybe now he's going to AA. So he has worked on himself. So then the question is, like, depending on how long ago, say, Jessica dated him, it's been 2-3 years, okay? And so he has changed whatever his life and his habits. And so is that fair to keep calling Jessica without verifying what's really going on with John at the present moment?
It's a good question. And I think firstly, that's why telling the truth is so important, right? That meaning that if I feel bad, let's give that chair a name.
Really comes into that because you can get the facts, but that was 5 years ago.
Right. I'm saying, you know, like if they
forthcoming in a situation like that anyway. Like that's part of recovery is that they're going to say, hey, just so you know, when you start to check me out, this is gonna look bad because of all of these reasons, and now I'm in recovery.
Oh, yeah,
But
yeah.
I
It
also
says
like,
a few things about that.
But I think it is still true. If it happened 5 years ago, you should say it happened 5 years ago, and it's up to the person, you know, to check if it is still the case or not. But if you are not saying anything because it happened 5 years ago, you are hiding this information.
but I like that it ends up being like my decision. Like you can collect all the facts,
Exactly.
but I'm like, okay, but this is my sandbox. I understand this, so I'm gonna still venture forward, and then I get to make the decision. Right?
Absolutely. That's what it has to be. It has to be, and you can only make that decision when you're given the facts, right? It has to be, and this is kind of what we're doing, right? You know, similar thing is I can't remember if this question came up here or somewhere else. If God forbid, like someone is a danger to the community, right? A child abuser, for God forbid, right? In that case, are you allowed to publicize their name in the community?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, right? You have to, because if this person was taken to court, they would be put in jail, right? Okay, and whatever in Jewish court, their name would be blasted everywhere because that has to protect the community.
He's your number one cheerleader.
Yeah.
Sounds inspiring.
By the way, we won the noise competition.
There are websites you can go to and check out your neighborhood to see how many.
Yes, yes, and it's completely endorsed by Judaism. It is completely.
7, did you?
Yes, those are the stuff. I'm going to sum them up and then I'm going to take the question. Okay. Okay. Great question. Right. So let's go through the 7 and then see if venting would fit under it. Okay. The speaker you must know it to be true or verify that it's true. Happen to you or you can verify it's true. You have to calmly think over that something wrong was actually done, not just that I didn't like it. Number 3, you have to attempt to resolve it with the offender first. Give the offender a chance to repair it, right? Which I guess kind of answers your question about addiction, right? Because if someone is in a relationship and addiction is the problem, generally they've given each other a chance to work it out, especially if you're talking about a relationship. And at that point, you know, you've resolved it, right? Like you've done your part. You're not allowed to exaggerate it. Your intent must be to either achieve justice. You can't do it because you hate the other person or because you want the other person to, you want to get back at the other person. The 6th one is if you can do it in any way without resorting to sharing that information, do it. And it must be clear that the consequences that the person's going to suffer is going to be no more than they would suffer if they went to a Beit Din, went to Jewish court, a Beit Din, a Jewish court.
Does that mean that if
we'll get to the venting in a second? Yeah,
like the carpool example, you can't even vent to your husband that night. What? I mean,
okay, so let's talk about. I did, and you don't know who it is.
I don't.
So there's no problem, right? So number 1, if you can vent without sharing the person's name, go ahead and vent to your heart's content, right? Be careful not to give enough thing. I'm not telling you that name, but you should just know she's got red hair and she lives on that block between that house and that house. No, doesn't count, right? But we, you know, we can vent, and the truth is, even with our spouse, it's a very good habit to get into, to vent without sharing who it is. Because oftentimes, you know, if you think about it, like family feuds and family fights often blow up, not because 2 people are fighting, but because everyone else gets involved, right? You share it and they're like, oh my gosh, how could they do that? And then they're like, what do you mean? Like, right? It's a good habit, right? We're social beings. We need connection, right? Things like therapists are great because they're bound by confidentiality, etc. But when it comes to venting, if you can, right, do it without sharing who it is. If you absolutely need to for advice or for whatever, if there's a constructive reason for it and it fulfills the 7 conditions, you're allowed to do it. And I want to just share one thing. I don't know how important or I think it's important to add in, but I don't know how relevant it is to everyone. For kids, the same thing is true, right? We can't when we're raising children and we're teaching them about Lashon Hara, it's very, very important that they also learn that they are allowed to tell things that are bothering them in their life. They have to reach out for help, right? Because it's that balance. We can't talk bad about other people, but if you're, sometimes we do vent and it fulfills the 7 conditions, right? It is for a constructive purpose. I need to work through this and I need someone else to work through this with me. And what's interesting to note is Jessica, I think, mentioned this, that you're supposed to say it. And the reason why you're supposed to say, like when you're doing this, you're supposed to say, I'm doing it for constructive purpose. I'm calling you to ask you about John because I met him, right? And he's asked me out. Why? Because like we learned last week, not only is speaking bad about other people forbidden, listening and believing is forbidden, right? So if you're asking a question and the other person needs to know that you're asking for a constructive purpose. All right, yes.
Okay, I also think when you don't mention the person's name, then you're talking about like an actual situation and problem solving versus like it's Gila, like like Gila, right? No, it's like the situation. It's not the person. So actually, it makes me feel better to vent without
Yeah.
the person's
name. Yeah, and you're also not getting into all their past history with that person,
and
right?
you're not sharing the other person, giving it life and existence.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.